Thanks everyone for this meetup. And indeed, this meetup, I mean, it's almost fully organized by my colleague Dan Holder. Due to his personal reason, he cannot moderate this session. I will be here moderate for him, but definitely Jim, Paule, and the other speakers contribute everything to this meetup. I'm just kind of a moderator here in this session. So today's topic is on diversity and inclusion issues in pharmaceuticals. So we have three wonderful speakers in this session. And first is Dr. Adrian Cole. But before I go to the kind of all the session, different speakers, I will first just kind of have some logistic kind of information here. Everyone here view only, and if you have any questions, you can type in your question in the Q&A features, and we will address your question at the end of all the three presentations. First, Dr. Adrian Cole. So Dr. Adrian Cole, I will stop sharing when I kind of introduce you. You can prepare your slides now. So Dr. Adrian Cole is currently Associate Director of Biostatistics at BMS. In his role, he designs, implements, and interprets the data from clinical trials to help bring new pharmaceutical innovations to patients in need. Dr. Cole serves as the chair of ASA's Committee on Minorities in Statistics, and he co-chaired the ASA's Anti-Racism Task Force. In these roles, he helps to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in the mathematical science, as well as provide support and mentorship to several younger professionals in the field. He recently authored a book chapter on diversity and inclusion in talent acquisition, included in the published work titled Leadership in Statistics and Data Science, Planning for Inclusive Excellence. Dr. Cole holds a BA in Math from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and a PhD in Statistics from NC State University, where he was the first African-American male to earn a PhD in Statistics from the time-honored department. Prior to attending graduate school, Dr. Cole served nearly 9 years in the United States Marine Corps, where he's received multiple awards for leadership and honorable service. Dr. Cole, it's all yours. Dr. Cole, you are on mute. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry about that. No, I was just saying thank you for that warm introduction, and to echo what you just mentioned, the content of my presentation today is really going to follow the order of the book chapter that was just mentioned. So if you have questions or thoughts about that book chapter, please enter it in the Q&A, and we can talk in more detail later during this experience today. But I thought we would get started by taking a moment to taking a moment to consider the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, is starting to become the case that many organizations, not only in the private sector, but across government and academia as well, are starting to really understand and to value the business case for DEI. And so when we talk about the value proposition of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the private sector, there are a few things that really stand out. Diversity, equity, and inclusion certainly can help an organization to demonstrate its social equity and responsibility, but it goes beyond that. It's been noted in numerous publications, and you know, there's been quite a bit of research around this now, but diversity, equity, and inclusion strongly correlates with innovation and competitive advantage. And diverse companies have shares that outperform companies that lack diversity. And so these are certainly some reasons that organizations are wise to consider how they can become more diverse, develop more inclusive cultures that value equity. So what's driving this value proposition? Well, there are a number of things. One, we know that diversity, equity, and inclusion helps to confront anti-innovation behaviors. For example, groupthink or homogeneous thinking. We know that it also helps organizations to have team members who are willing and empowered to challenge the status quo. In addition, it helps with talent acquisition and retention. I know the focus of our time together today is really on talent acquisition, but make no mistake about it, how well you acquire talent absolutely correlates with your ability to retain your talent. And then it also helps us to better understand our customer needs. And this is especially true for organizations that have products that are marketed or services that are utilized by our entire society. Understanding the broad range of customer needs is very important. All right. And so next, I want to spend just a few moments talking about attracting talent. And I think it's wise to mention before we get into detail here that attracting talent starts well before you write your job description or you write your job advertisement and start to circulate it throughout social media and other platforms. Attracting talent really begins by assessing your organization's culture. This is really step one, in my opinion. It's so critical for you to know where does your organization stand. And by that, I mean, there are a number of questions that organizations should carefully consider. For example, how healthy is your organization's culture? Does your organization value diversity, equity, and inclusion? Even more than having values for diversity, equity, and inclusion, do the behaviors and the norms within your organization reflect those values? There are a number of other questions as well. That's just a sample. But knowing where you stand is going to be a critical part of your ability to attract diverse talent. Next, it's important to answer some additional questions. For example, if you are thinking about how you can help individual team members grow, maybe personal discovery is important. And so maybe there's an opportunity within your organization to make available tools that help individual team members assess their biases in a safe space. Now that's important, in a psychologically safe space, but certainly we want to courageously challenge them to grow in that area if they are finding that they're biased in some way. Maybe we want to answer these questions by exploring some group experiences. And so there are a number of organizations. As a matter of fact, I think this is really sort of a common tactic that's used nowadays, but a number of organizations that conduct internal studies to explore the wide range of employee experiences. And oftentimes, these internal studies are administered along the line of some dimension of diversity and equity and inclusion that's really important. And once you conduct these studies, it's important to think about how you're going to act on the trends that are identified. Now, when I use that term employee experiences, I'm talking about a broad range of employee experiences here. I'm thinking about and how employees find their work to be meaningful. I'm thinking about supportive management. I'm thinking about the overall work environment. I'm thinking about employees' access to growth opportunities. Does your organization care about the health and well-being of your team? And this is one that I think is very critical. Do your employees trust their leadership? These are a list of employee experiences that companies would be wise to try to tap into and understand. Now, once you assess your culture, you do that internal audit or those internal data collection exercises to assess your organization. Now the question is, we've conducted these internal studies. What do we do with this data? What do we do now? And so just by way of a high level presentation, I think it's wise for organizations to consider how they can go about creating a DEI vision if there's not one, and then also a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Now, in addition to creating this broad vision and this broad strategy, there are a number of tactics that organizations can employ to help support their strategy. For example, it's commonplace now for organizations to develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion team. Now, it's important for this team to have senior leader sponsorship so that leaders throughout the organization can be held accountable for progressing the organization's agenda in this area. And of course, this diversity, equity, and inclusion team is typically a point of contact for senior leaders to the heartbeat of the organization in this space. So very important tactic there. DEI messaging is also going to be very important. And oftentimes that messaging can show up in various ways. It can show up in trainings. It can show up in the performance management cycle and conversations that leaders are having with their team members. And it can also show up in leadership memos that are being broadcast throughout the company, and even memos about special events that the company may be organizing to celebrate its diversity and inclusive culture. Another tactic is to create employee resource groups. So for example, if you look across most large pharmaceutical companies, you'll see these employee resource groups or affinity groups that are really created to help support, to provide advocacy, education, and mentoring for folks who are part of critical social groups like African Americans, or more broadly speaking, Black employees, or Latinx employees, or women, or members of the LGBTQ plus community, so on and so forth. Oh, let me not forget veteran community, right? We need to acknowledge those team members as well. But creating employee resource groups can be a key part of an organization's broader approach to creating a healthy culture. And then this is one that I think is also very important. I just believe that what gets measured gets accomplished. And if we don't measure it, there's a strong likelihood that it may not be accomplished. So making sure that your organization is really thoughtful about how they're developing DEI-related performance markers so that you can assess your progress in this area. Now that you've assessed your culture, you've gone through the work required to create a healthy culture, how are you going to go about promoting a healthy culture, right? And so how do we make members of these critical demographic groups aware of our healthy culture? So there are a number of different approaches that can be taken. One approach that is very common is diversity segmented recruiting. And this is an approach in recruiting that is really borrowed from diversity segmented marketing. It's applied in the recruiting context, but recruiting materials are designed with special groups in mind, understanding the values of those groups. And you design your recruiting materials to really speak to those values and help them to understand how your organization may have shared values as well. Diversity referral bonuses. This is one that is not quite as popular, but there is some precedent out there in the business literature for organizations having success with this approach. And so I've given you an example there. Of course, digital marketing, being very engaged across many digital platforms is going to be to your organization's advantage. And also supporting and establishing a presence at a number of events that are intended to serve diverse communities. For example, if we're thinking about the American Statistical Association, there's the Committee on Minorities and Statistics that hosts a number of events, one being the Diversity Mentoring Program that is provided at JSM, another being StatFest. We now have the JEDI outreach group that is also going to be developing some programming as well. So you can find these groups and these organizations that are already supporting the communities that you may be interested in attracting talent from. And then last but not least is going to be relationship building. There's no better way to promote your healthy culture than to build healthy relationships. Now, this one is more time consuming, but developing those mentor-mentee relationships, developing cross-organizational, cross-sector relationships with our colleagues in different spaces, and really nurturing and growing those relationships helps people to understand the growth in this area that your organization may have achieved. So really quickly, let's talk briefly about selecting talent. And I hate to hurry through this one, but this one is very important and is one that's very near and dear to my heart. So when we think about objective screening and interviewing, there are a couple of things that organizations would be wise to consider. One, do we understand the observed barriers to objective selection? And when I say observed barriers, I mean barriers that have been repeatedly discussed in the recruiting and human resource literature. For example, we know for a fact that stereotypes and expectations create barriers to objective selection. And oftentimes these stereotypes and expectations fall along the lines of demographic characteristics, or maybe even cross-organizational experiences, right? So maybe, a person, a leader has transitioned organizations or transitioned companies, and the way that selection and interviewing was done at the previous company, it may not align with the values of your current company, but they bring those experiences with them, and it can create this space where expectations have a negative bias on the selection of team members. Confirmation bias is another really big one that's been discussed frequently in the literature as well. And here the question really is, are we seeking to affirm our own beliefs about a particular candidate, or are we seeking to find the truth about that candidate? Another type of bias is affinity bias. And I think we all are aware of this. We tend to prefer others who are like us in most cases. And when I say like us, that can be demographic similarities, that can be similarities in attitudes, that could be prior experiences. Maybe I have an affinity for people who have also transitioned from an academic setting or something, right? So there are a number of different ways that affinity bias can manifest itself. And we just want to be aware of those so that we can develop approaches to help us to reduce the impact of those biases on our screening and interviewing processes. Now, when we think about fair and balanced interviews, there are a number of tactics, again, that we're starting to see emerge in the literature to help us to reduce the impact of some of these barriers that we just talked about before. So having a diverse interview team is going to be very important for a number of reasons. One, you want to make sure that candidates who value diversity and inclusion, they see that upfront about your organization. Two, having a diverse interview team can help to minimize confirmation bias and affinity bias when team members are meeting to discuss whether or not a candidate may be an appropriate selection for their organization. Now, having a diverse interview team is not enough. I think I just spoke to this one, but I'll repeat it once more. Having an inclusive selection process. If we have a diverse team, but if you're meeting to discuss the suitability of a candidate, and you have very strong voices in the room and other voices are not allowed to really participate, or they don't have the appropriate weight in the conversation, but that's not a very inclusive process. So you have the diversity, but you haven't created an inclusive selection process that could still prevent you from being able to attract that diverse talent that's going to drive those positive business outcomes. Structured interviews are also very important to consider. So here, companies may want to think about having predetermined processes for recording observations. Companies may want to think about having structured criteria for decision making. I remember at one point in my professional journey, I was participating in an interview, and some of my colleagues were making very general statements like, the person may not fit our culture, but the reason that those types of statements were allowed to exist was because at that time we didn't have this level of structure in our interview process. And so providing that structure, maybe even going to the point of having scoring sheets or rubrics where you are intentionally assessing the characteristics that you think are important for success in the role, could be very advantageous for an organization. And here we also have the question structure as a very important consideration. Typically, we see a lot of organizations prefer to use behavioral questions where candidates are asked to look back on their own experiences and to recall a time where they've demonstrated some behavior or some critical thinking skill or some other skill. And there are proponents of moving away from behavioral questions to situational questions that may allow organizations to better assess the suitability of a candidate. You might have a candidate that doesn't have a specific experience that someone is asking about, and that can be very problematic as opposed to observing their adaptability in real time. So putting it all together, the six items that we've quickly discussed that I think could help to create somewhat of a roadmap for organizations that are trying to grow in this area. One, honestly assess your organization's culture. Two, courageously create a culture that values diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I use that word courageously with intent. Intentionally source talent from diverse candidate pools. So where are you fishing? Are you fishing in pools where this talent exists? Are you fishing in pools where you're most comfortable, where that talent may not exist and that could be preventing you from being successful in this way? Purposefully engage candidates from critical social groups, objectively screen and assess candidate qualifications, and lastly, rank candidates fairly according to the broader business needs, and that includes technical and cultural. We have a tendency sometimes in our field to put a premium on technical skills, and we should. Candidates should be technically qualified, but how does a candidate help us to grow culturally as well? I think that's a very important consideration. All right, so really quickly, I want to talk about diverse talent acquisition at BMS. And so I'm just going to cover this in a very high level fashion, right? So when we think about talent acquisition at BMS, there are two things that we're really trying to do to help increase the number of diverse prospects who are in our candidate pool, and then to help convert those prospects into candidates, who actually are coming in and being considered for opportunities. The first question that we try to answer with our approach is, who are we, right? So if you're talking to someone and you're trying to, tell them about a role that you may have in your organization, they may be thinking, well, who are you, right? And so we want to make sure that people understand, why it is that we exist, right? So we exist to transform patient lives through science. We want to make sure people have a good understanding of our mission. We want to make sure they have a good understanding of our values. And it helps when you are displaying your values and people can see that you have a value for inclusion, particularly candidates who are from diverse communities that have been historically excluded. All right, we let them know a little bit about our presence. And we talked to them a bit about the science that we conduct. At the heart of all of this, we are a science company. And then because we've shown these highlights, someone may ask us to prove it. Certainly if someone was coming to me bragging about how great they are, I'm going to want to know, well, prove it. Tell me, show me how great you are, right? So we want them to understand the strength of our portfolio, our commercial portfolio. We want them to understand our commitment to diversity, inclusion, and health equity. So we highlight some of the things that we're doing in this space. For example, the Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation is awarding $50 million in U.S. health equity grants in the BMS therapeutic areas by 2025. We want to highlight that. That's good work. That's helping to be a responsible corporate citizen. We highlight some of the other ways that we live our mission. It's not enough just to say that this is our mission, but how we live in it. How do we display it in our daily actions and decisions? We talk about global hope, which is another way that we live our mission. And then we also highlight our people and business resource groups. Again, the idea here is to make sure that people who are coming from some of these critical demographic groups that we think will add the level of diversity and inclusiveness to help us continue to be a leader in our industry. We want people to understand that we've created structures for folks to tap into to be supported. We talk a little bit about some of the other things we're doing to be responsible as well. And then we, as a cherry on top of the sundae, highlight some of the awards that we received for the good work that the company is doing. And so to end this talk with a quote from our Chief Executive Officer, we want people to know that this is real to us, right? So we come to work each day driven by our mission, acting with a sense of urgency for our patients and their families, because there is still so much to do. And from the standpoint of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think we would all agree that there is still so much to do. So I'm very thankful that we're having this conversation. Looking forward to taking questions at the end of this, at the end of our time together. And for those who have additional questions and want to reach out and continue the conversation, my contact information is here in the slide deck. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for Adrian, your presentation. So Brian, you can start sharing your slides. Yeah. So the next speaker is Dr. Brian Whelan. Dr. Brian Malin is a Senior Director of Real World and Access Analytic within Lilly's Global Statistical Sciences Organization, GSS organization. In his role, he provides strategic and administrative leadership to teams of statistical scientists whose research contributes and analytical modeling enable patient access to treatments. Dr. Malin's career with Lilly spans over 20 years in various technical and leadership roles within GSS and advanced analytics, where he is known for establishing cultures of high performance, inclusion, and innovation within his teams. Dr. Malin is a passionate advocate for professional development and diversity and inclusion. He brings these passions to Lilly and to his broader service to the profession. Dr. Malin is a past chair of the ASA Committee on Minorities in Statistics and is a founder of GSM Diversity Workshop and mentoring program. His service to the professional spans over 15 years and includes multiple leadership roles within ASM and the International Biometric Society. He currently serves on the executive committee of the ASM biopharmaceutical sections and is the 2022 chair-elect of the sections. Dr. Malin holds a PhD in statistics from the Ohio State University and a BA in mathematics from the University of Georgia. He is a fellow of American Statistical Association. So now, Brian, you can start your presentation.
Great, thank you, Jun Shui, for the introduction. Thanks to Paulette, Jim, and others for the invitation to be here today to talk about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. The title of my presentation is different than that which was advertised. So I've titled this Diversity in Our Profession, Parallels to Clinical Trials. This idea of creating a diverse profession, diverse workplaces is something that many have tried and many feel is complex. And as statisticians, we're very, we're very used to, very comfortable with this idea of taking the complex and trying to simplify it. Try to take the complex as we work with our business partners, as we work with customers, try to take that which is complex and simplify it. And there are a couple of ways that we do this. One is data reduction. You simplify the problem by really just leaving out details, right? And data reduction to the point where the individual on the receiving end can get it. And yes, they're going to miss some things, but maybe they have the idea. That's not what I want to do today. I will speak high level, but I am very happy to go into details because the details are where we get it right, or the details will be where we get it wrong. So I'm not here to have a data reduction approach. The other approach that we often use with colleagues when we're trying to help them understand a concept that may be challenging or that may be foreign is this idea of translation or projection. So I can take an idea and translate it into a space that you're familiar with and use that as a breeding ground for conversation and see those parallels back. And so what I thought with this group, that we would take this idea of diversity in our profession, this idea of diversifying workforces, right? And think about parallels to the clinical trial setting. And I really did that just to keep it fun a little bit for me, rather than feel like I'm really lecturing or anything like that. I don't have the privilege of being able to see faces, but I hope you all are engaged and excited to talk about this topic. My opening slide here includes a stock photo. Let's stay there for a moment. Includes a stock photo from Lily. And just to get you warmed up, I don't have the ability to kind of hear responses, but just to get you warmed up, there are 6 individuals in this photo. How many of them do you believe are statisticians? You might want to put it in the chat, hear your answers in the chat feature. How many of them are statisticians in this photo, do you think? All you have is a visual. I'll give you a hint that there's at least one. But I'm curious, this is one of these things where we get to kind of check ourselves with our own perceptions. How many in this photo? Thanks for being brave enough, everyone. I'm seeing everything from the entire group. Everyone in this photo is a statistician. That's for those are those real sleuths that think I'm trying to trick you. And then none and numbers in between. Now, as you did that, I hope you also, in your mind, registered who you identified as statisticians in the photo. Not just thinking of a number from 1 to 6, but when you looked, who did you identify? And might that say something about the unconscious biases that we all carry with us? Might it say something about our experiences? Might it say something about our lack of experiences? And how might this impact our approaches, our success when it comes to diversifying the profession? I will point out, well, I'm unable to point out, so I'll have to verbally explain to you, the gentleman that is in the center of the photo, Black gentleman wearing a blue shirt, he is a statistician. The woman that is working is in the far left of the photo that's working very hard, head down, trying to figure something out. She is a statistician. The others are colleagues at Lilly. So if you got 2, I can't give you a prize, but just a way to kind of get us warmed up to thinking about this idea. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just a little bit about me. In fact, I won't really touch on the points on the slide. I think some of those were included in the kind introduction that Junshui offered. But I share this with you, some of the roles that I've taken on, et cetera, to really just make the point that I'm here today because I care about the stats profession. I'm here today because I care about the stats profession in pharma, but also beyond. And I care so much about building an equitable, diverse, and inclusive profession. That's why I'm here. That's why I've moved things around in my schedule. That's why I'm glad to see all the participants that are on. In my career, I have recruited at least a couple dozen statisticians to Lilly from my own network. They've been white, Asian, Black, Latino. Across the board, I believe in a diverse workforce. And when I look out, I know that in many spaces, there's a lot of work to do to really achieve diversity in our workforces. And even more work to do to create equity, to create a level playing field so that all have equitable opportunity, that we get the impact of every employee that we should. So this is the real challenge. It's not about just numbers. It's about how do you create an environment that where your company, where your organization will will reach its potential in terms of impact. And so I care a whole lot about this, and I'm just pleased to be able to be here with you today to share a few thoughts, to provoke thoughts, and then to learn from all of you. Colleague just spoke before Adrian. Really always great to see him and hear from him, and always learn a lot from what he's presented. So happy to be here to learn and to share. If we go to the next slide. I want to use as a motivation today a phone call that I got in the past year. It was from a friend of mine. And he essentially said to me, Brian, in all my career, I've only worked with 2 Black statisticians. So he was talking to me, I was one of them, right? He's worked with one other. And he said, and I've never, in all my career, he's 25 years into his career, never interviewed a Black statistician for employment. And at 25 years in his career, he had this epiphany that something wasn't right and had awareness enough to want to do something about it. It's a shame it took so long, yes, but we all have to be forward looking. Current events, I think, awakened him to some point of awareness about systemic barriers, systemic disparities, and he was awakened enough to not just ponder it, but to want to do something about it. In his leadership role at his organization, which was a pharma organization, to say, I want to do something about it. But that's not all. As a statistician or as a mathematician, we all learn this habit early on of picking up counterexamples. We carry counterexamples with us to refute ideas that may be put forward. And he knows he can't say it's impossible. He knows he can't say it's too hard to diversify a stats workforce in pharma because he's seen it done. He's seen others do it. He reached out to me saying, how have you done it? So he's seen it done. He's embraced the idea that there's a challenge that he can meet. And I'm convinced that if every leader, every stats leader in each organization embraces that idea, you're on a journey that will reach some level of success. So for the next, he asked me, how have you done it? For the next several minutes, I'll just address the general question. And I'll do it by talking about these common statements that I hear, and I'll offer solutions in response to those statements. So this first statement, thank you, is, I hear this quite often, I want to hire diverse talent, but they don't apply. That's a really comfortable statement to make because the problem then is external. The problem then is it's not that my organization has some practices that may be unwelcoming, inequitable, or perhaps discriminatory. It's that they don't apply. And so hiring diverse talent then is not my problem to solve, it's someone else's. My encouragement today, if you'll go back to the previous slide, please. My encouragement today is that you'll have a mindset shift and that you take the problem on as your own, rather than saying they don't apply. You say, I failed to reach that target pool and attract them. And now as we go to the next slide, what I'd like to do is just borrow from a parallel of clinical trials. So this is a really simple diagram on the left. With any clinical trial, we have some population that we're concerned with recruiting. Let me say it differently. We have a population that we're concerned with being enrolled in our trial to reach the outcomes that we want to measure. And we see on the left-hand side of the diagram that somehow with our efforts in that kind of pre-screen period, we're able to touch certain members of the population. And then all we're trying to do is draw them through all the way to the right through that process. And as statisticians in study design, we spend a lot of time thinking about what must be done to draw patients through that cycle. That's kind of the operational lens that we have to think about, even for our scientific objectives of the study. So there's often in the clinical trial space, some kind of pre-screening that happens before anyone formally enters the trial and is screened and in a run-in phase or whatever to decide if they qualify with inclusion exclusion to be randomized, there's often some kind of pre-screen that the investigators at the particular sites know something about some folks that they want to try to bring in. And then they enter into some official period where inclusion and exclusion criteria are evaluated. Maybe there's some run-in period of evaluating patients over a period of time. And then we get to the yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down, and you get to randomization, and then patients are on trial. We want to see them long enough to get to our primary objective. And so I thought as we go to the next slide that there is a parallel to the workforce recruiting process. That sort of pre-screen period now, think of that as all of those touch points that you have in bringing candidates into an organization before you ever get to a formal interview process. All those touch points, whether it's recruiting from your network, whether it's an informal application review, whether it's your presence at particular partners or conferences or schools or all of these things. They serve to kind of draw people in, even before there's an interview. Adrian spoke to this a bit. Even before there's a formal application and review and interview, the formal evaluation process, there are ways that we try to draw people in. Then, of course, we move in the screening to that real formal process of interview and evaluation. Randomization is like that hiring point, and then in the trial being like that time on the workforce. So I'm going to use those parallels as we go through. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So now to this first challenge that I hear. I try to recruit, they don't apply. That's simply saying that I'm somehow not reaching. We've tried to reformulate that. I am somehow now not reaching my target population. Let's advance one, please. One more, I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna do the parallel between the clinical trial and talent attraction. The first thing we might consider with clinical trials, if we had a clinical trial, we said somehow we're not reaching the target population, one of the things we would ask is, have we gone to the right investigators? Do we have the right investigative sites that have access to the subjects that we need for the trial? The other way to say that is, we want to be sure that we go where the patients are. And in a similar way, from a talent attraction standpoint, we want to be sure that we need to have an intentional recruiting presence. We'll talk more about that, but essentially it's about going where the people are. It's the same idea. For a clinical trial, if we're not reaching our target population, we might look at our recruitment sort of advertising sort of methods. And in a similar way with our in our talent attraction, we have to address those things as well. Maybe the way that we're recruiting, maybe the way we're advertising, maybe the way we're communicating is missing certain populations. In a clinical trial, we will say, God, we're not getting the right patients, the patients we thought we needed in the study. It would cause us to think about our inclusion-exclusion criteria. What is it that's weeding people out? And is that necessary? Oftentimes, our protocol amendments are all about changing inclusion-exclusion criteria when we realize that perhaps we've defined something that's too narrow. The parallel to that, I would say, is the language in your job description that really kind of set up inclusion-exclusion criteria. And research has shown very clearly that for minority group members and also for women, that many times individuals will not apply to a job unless they feel like they can check the box on every requirement. Not just every requirement and every preference that's listed. Now, if you know that research, that leads you to thinking about a different way to craft and write your job descriptions. If we'll go to the next slide, please. So just a word on intentional recruiting presence. I started by saying just go where the population is that you want to reach. And here are some examples: the diversity program at JSM, there's a diversity program at ENAR, StatFest, another a popular program, SACNIS, an organization focused on Latino and Native American populations, Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in the Sciences. Historically, Black colleges and universities, primarily white institutions that have a strong track record of diversity, et cetera, et cetera. There are things you can do to kind of change and be intentional about your presence that gives you access to relationship building. And again, that pre-screen of drawing people in, right? That pre-screen of drawing people in. I think it was, maybe it was last week. The days start to run together for me, but there was just a conference hosted by Pharma that included a job fair and was a Pharma initiative to attract underrepresented groups in the sciences to the pharmaceutical industry. So a cross-industry initiative, and I'm sure many on the call participated in that, or at least their organizations had people participate in that. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next point. So you develop the presence, and I just want to say a couple of points about communicating with the target population. First of all, the idea of being present is an opportunity to develop connection. And there's nothing more powerful from my perspective than direct connection, person-to-person connections. This usually will not be the connection, my opinion, from your HR team to a candidate. That's the connection scientist to scientist, statistician to statistician. It's said every day that people don't leave jobs, they leave supervisors. What's fundamental in that is that people make decisions based on connection or not with other people. And I think it suggests that people might join organizations based on relationships with people as well. So that I think there's power in that direct connection. Second, connection relationship, it's all about communication. 100%. The root of relationship is communication. So I tell you, be present, reach out. And the important point of communication, communication is the core of relationship, but the core of communication is listening. And so reach out, be present, and then listen. Listen to the concerns, listen to the questions, listen to the needs of the candidates, and respond. And respond, and you will draw people in. I already touched on this point of opting out around job description language. A lot of research on that, and you can work very, very directly with your HR teams. Look at your job descriptions and say, might this limit my ability to reach target populations? The corollary to that, the consequence of that is this is limiting my ability to innovate. This is limiting my ability to lead differently. It's limiting, right? It's all the consequences of not having the population that you desire. Next slide, please. Okay, next on the common statement I hear, I want to hire diverse talent, but those who apply don't qualify. It's kind of this unicorn excuse. It's very, very rare to find that talent. I'm gonna give you a hard challenge here. A constructive shift in mindset is to say that let's stay on the previous just 1 second. Thanks so much, Jim. I appreciate you doing this. This constructive mindset shift is my evaluation or qualification process is likely biased, and I need to be intentional about repairing it. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Here's a hard truth, is that if you've really put in the work and somehow you find yourself without results and outcomes in reaching your target population, whether it's a clinical trial or whether it's in this setting, you have to really face a hard truth. And my statement here is that your failure to hire is a type 2 error and that it reflects bias. Now, I understand you might say, Brian, you can't say that. That's an assumption. We have a great process. How can you make such a statement? You're in an observational setting. It's not a randomized experiment. You cannot know definitively. And in fact, you can't know it because you can't observe the counterfactual. When I fail to hire someone, I don't get to see the results of how successful they would have been had I hired them. Those are all valid pushbacks. Let's go to the next slide. We're just going to build here. My first point to this idea that there's no controlled experiment, you can't talk about causation, all these things. There have been numerous experiments looking at hiring practices and processes that clearly show that there are biases that exist, even to the triviality of based on the sound of someone's name. So you could take a resume that said Joe Johnson and change one letter on the entire resume, and now instead of Joe, it's Jose Johnson. And the outcomes are different. The same resume. So my point is the research has been done, controlled, well-designed experiments have been done, and that there's a lot of evidence to say, yeah, if I'm not getting the outcomes, I better look for bias in my system. The next point, though, is you can't observe, Brian, you can't observe the counterfactual. I agree, you can't. But I believe there are proxies that are available that you can observe. And in our very connected world, it's easier than ever. So if I have a candidate that didn't make it through our process, and I see that candidate now at a comparable organization, a comparable competitor, and I watch that candidate's career and see their success, then I have to wonder, what is it that I didn't do? What is it that we didn't do correctly? Okay, it looks like we're behind schedule, so I need to move. I'm sorry. Thanks for the reminder. Let me go very quickly. Next, you could just build this all the way out, I think. Okay, we try to hire diverse talent. They don't choose us. I'm just going to say, you got to do the hard work to understand why. Next slide. And understanding why, there's a whole lot of examination that can be done to system, structure, culture. Culture is kind of the main thing. But one thing that's easy, that's low-hanging fruit, is to suggest that it's probably the experience of your current employees in that group or the experience of the candidates, and trust that communication, again, in our very connected world, how you treat people matters, and people know it. Let's go, next slide, please. So we'll keep going. For employee retention, I just want to say that we spend a lot of time as statisticians, if we think in the clinical trial, about how to keep subjects in a trial, right? Because it's not just good enough to hire, or it's not just good enough to enroll or randomize. We want to keep them to get the outcomes. Same thing in the hiring process. I very rarely hear that my organization has a thoughtful plan to ensure retention. I hear these other things, but I never hear about this thoughtful plan. Adrian made the point earlier, this connection between retention and recruiting is real. If you are failing to retain talent, that will eventually show itself in your recruiting process. If you do well at bringing on talent and retaining them, it will show itself in your recruiting process, and it becomes easier and easier and easier. Let's keep going. I think I can get to closing thoughts. So to be successful, my encouragement here is to reject common excuses, that they don't apply, they don't exist, they're too rare, they don't choose us. I encourage you to just really think holistically and act to drive change. Ensure that you act on every part of that cycle, of that process, not just on can we get more people to apply, or any segment. Act on every segment, including the employee engagement piece once people are on board. And I encourage you to remain committed to outcomes, because really, this is not just a numbers game. Missing out on talent means that you're missing out on leadership that your organization needs. It means that you're missing out on innovation that will benefit your organization. These are imperatives for our industry. They're imperatives for the patients we serve. With that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mellon. Paulette, you can start to share your slides. So, where Dr. Paulette CC is sharing her slides. Paulette CC is a principal scientist in the neuroscience and ophthalmology therapeutic areas at Merck, where she provides statistical support in the design, methodology, and implementation of clinical trials. She has also worked in the diabetes, cardiovascular, and the anti-infective area. Paulette co-lead the biostatistics and research decision sciences diversity and inclusion task force. The goal of the task force is to attract more diverse candidates, as well as contribute to develop and inspire current employees as part of Merck's diverse and inclusive workforce. She was also an adjunct in the statistics department at Temple University. Paulette CC holds a BA in mathematics from Franklin and Marshall College, and is the first African American to earn a PhD in statistics from Temple University. Prior to her statistics career, she was a group health and pension actuary. So Paulette, you can take over from here.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about promoting a diverse and inclusive workplace, the challenges and opportunities. Oh my goodness, my screen is frozen.
So if that's the case, you can unshare and share it. Oh, it's working. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it just started. It's fickle today. So first I'm going to give you a little introduction, talk about some of the benefits, the challenges and opportunities, both internal and external, and then provide a brief summary. Now, many institutions have diversity and inclusion as an integral part of the organization's culture, but now they are trying to reaffirm those initiatives. And they were incentivized as a result of the current unanticipated turbulent world events, such as the death of George Floyd and the social call around the world for social justice. And in the middle of all of this, we're in the middle of a pandemic, which has shifted the way that we all work and has presented more challenges to us. Health challenges, economic challenges, social justice, work-life balance. So all of these things have contributed to another layer of complexity. Now, organizations, it is desired to maintain a respectful, inclusive workforce. And like I said, over the last couple of years, since 2020, they have launched many new initiatives in order to address diversity and inclusion. So companies and organizations are revisiting how diversity and inclusion are promoted. And one example of this, as far as an organization, is that the American Statistical Association in 2020 launched the Anti-Racism Task Force and the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Group, or JEDI. And if you want to learn more about this, you can go to airstat.org. Now, some of the benefits of diversity and inclusion is you want to attract top talent, and then once you get them, as has been stated by my prior speakers, you want to make sure that you keep them there. And this is important because diverse talent allows us to acquire different perspectives and ways to look at a problem. It facilitates creativity, and this allows us to have an increase in innovation, the way we approach problems, the way we solve problems, and the way that we approach the world in general. And what is also good about this is you get a more productive workforce, and as we all know, this leads to higher profitability. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to move something here on the screen. I'm not having too much success. Okay.
You can see it.
You can see it? All right, let's see. Okay. Okay, this is good. All right. So the business case for diversity and inclusion in executive teams remains strong. McKinsey and Company did some research, and they found that by 2019, that companies that had more diversity were 36% more profitable than companies who did not. And as you can see that over the years, starting in 2014, that it has been constantly increasing in profitability. Now I'm frozen again. Okay, some benefits, other benefits of diversity and inclusion is it fosters a sense of belonging to the organization. Where folks belong, that feel that they belong to the organization and they're really a part of it, they work harder, and there's a greater chance that they will that you will be able to retain them. It's also important because you want to have an atmosphere that's devoid of marginalization. Diversity without inclusion is definitely a failure, because if you just have people there and they feel like their only purpose that they're serving to the organization is so they can check off a box, then they don't feel very comfortable, and you will have difficulty retaining those employees. It's also important to foster an atmosphere of acceptance and tolerability. And we want to acquire positive views from the communities that the organization serves. When the outside world looks at us and we're trying to recruit, we want them to see that our diverse population within the organization actually reflects the population diversity and the community as a whole. Now, there's some internal challenges. I'm just going to go briefly through this. I know we're running low on time. We have some internal challenges within our organizations. And Gartner did a study of 98 HR leaders, and the question was, does your organization set explicit diversity goals? And what really stuck out to me was not just that more than half of the organizations had explicit goals, but the fact that 39% of them don't have explicit goals. So how are you supposed to get diversity and inclusion if you don't even have a goal? And that 5% of those companies weren't even sure if they did or not. Some other challenges, as Adrian and Brian also alluded to earlier, was they say that there's a small pool of diverse candidates. And this may be a cop out or whatever, but I'm sure that organizations will be taking the advice, some of the advice of my prior speakers to find those pool of diverse candidates. Another challenge is you have decision makers may not be aware of some of the unconscious bias, especially as it may relate to recruiting. If you keep recruiting in the same places as my prior panelists said, then you'll get the same results. It is also important for organizations to show a sustained commitment in the community, because this is a long game. You have to be out there constantly letting the community know that you're really serious about diversity and inclusion, and this is not just something that's a fad for the time. Another place that you have some challenges and considerations is where your hiring process may exclude skilled talent. So you need to expand. You need to expand your talent search. You can look at social media, business group organizations, etc. And focus on the needs definitions, not the credentials, when you write up those job descriptions. For example, some job descriptions may be very strict, like they'll say you need a PhD in statistics or you need a PhD in biostatistics. So even if a person has, let's say, a PhD in mathematics, they may feel they're not qualified for the job. And also, you should stress the requirement
I think we
Yeah,
lost.
it seems like the Zoom has some technical issues. Should we
Why don't
wait?
we? Yeah, maybe she'll come back, but perhaps we could see if there are any questions while she comes back.
Olay? Oh, she logged out. Oh,
Yeah, I think
okay.
she lost her.
So we can make full use of this period of time because we are somewhat under behind the schedule. So before Polly coming back, is there any questions for Andrea and Brian? You can type your question at the chat and also at the question answer session. So at this moment, I do see people have a number of requests, have very positive kind of feedback. And I think Jim and Megan, they kind of addressed some of the asking the book chapter, the book's name, and some was kind of asking for the slides. So they were addressed, yeah. So any other questions okay. What can people who aren't in the recruiting position do to help ensure diversity in their departments? So Brian, Andre, I'm sorry, Adrian, you can just kind of address whenever kind of you have kind of some thoughts on this question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. First, let me point out that if you're in an organization and you don't see a lot of effort in the space, and if you have a passion for it, an interest in it, then I think that's certainly an opportunity for you to demonstrate leadership. That's number one. Number two, I think it starts with talking to your line management about this interest. And if you are already participating in events outside of your organization, you can take the initiative to start getting plugged into events and communities that may have that a large percentage of that talent that you think your organization needs. Sometimes if you get the ball rolling and then you go to your management, you go to your leaders and you say, hey, these are relationships that I've developed. These are things that I've been doing outside of work that I think will bring value into work. There might be an opportunity for you to write up the business case for why the organization should support you to continue along in those endeavors. So that's just some quick things that come to mind, but really good question.
Great. I think I'll just add to that a little bit. I'll probably focus on three things that one could do that's not in a recruiting position. Number one, you can be present. You can be part of making those connections with individuals and bringing talent to the organization. So number one, be present and bring talent. You can take that initiative. You can bring the talent. Second is to advocate. Advocate quite clearly for an increased focus or a renewed focus or action where there may have been inaction. So number one, you can be present. Number two, you can advocate. And then number three, that I think is really important, is to challenge non-inclusive behaviors, right? If you're in the interview room or when you or in any part of the process, challenge your peers so that status quo no longer remains. That's part of holding up a mirror. And you do that, you can do that in a non-confrontational manner. You can do that just by asking questions. What did you mean by that? When you said that, what do you mean it's not a fit? You can ask questions, you can draw out, you can challenge. And so advocate, challenge non-inclusive behaviors, be present and bring talent, I think are three things that all of us can do.
So while we are still waiting for Paulette, I do see there is another question in the chatting session. How do you avoid the trap of looking like you are just checking the box for diversity and inclusion rather than providing real change?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, the language there is powerful, right? The trap. It almost implies an external force that's operating. But how do you avoid just looking like you're checking the box rather than providing real change? I think success looks like acting on culture. Culture is always about values. So leaders, for example, if they want to drive and change culture, you're constantly reinforcing messages back to our values, right? I mean, that's just how it is. And redundancy helps, and you drive changes. You drive changes in culture, and the most obvious signs of changes in culture are when individuals now, not the leaders, really adopt the changes and take it on and challenge one another to always operate in alignment with culture. To not look like you're just checking the box. There are some simple things. You don't just hire people, right? You hire them, you bring them on, you listen, you have career plans and things like that in place for individuals. You provide real opportunity. You do all those things where it's not just just checking a diversity box. You turn the corner from the diversity element to now the full inclusion and the equitable treatment.
Yep, I couldn't agree more, Brian. And I think, really highlighting the equity piece there is important, making sure that all team members, particularly those team members that have been historically excluded, making sure that those team members have the equal likelihood of having the same professional and career outcomes within your organization. If you bring in a lot of people who just look different, who sound different, who may have different cultural experiences, but all of those folks don't have access to the same type of professional outcomes, you've not done a good job of demonstrating that you're not just checking the box.
Welcome back, Paulette. Glad to see you've reconnected.
Yes, sorry about that. Hopefully you all will be able to see the rest of my presentation when it's posted on the site. Pico informed me that they had electrical outage in my area and they shut everything down. Of course.
So Paulette, can you present or you cannot present anymore?
I could present, but since we only have 13 minutes left, would it be better to answer the questions that the people have?
So I mean, we kind of addressed two very important questions. I think if you really kind of can finish, for example, within 10 minutes or
yeah, I could do that.
Okay, good.
All right. I have to remember where I was, but I. Oh, first I have to find, it did something to my presentation.
Paulette, while you're putting it up, would you mind if we responded to a question about unicorn?
Sure.
I would love
ahead.
to hear Brian's take on that, and I have some thoughts as well that I would like to share while we're getting resituated.
Okay.
Yeah. So Richard asked a question. Where he stated sometimes that unicorn myth, the fitting of a candidate does play out. Can you expound more on how to get around this? I think it's fair to acknowledge that historically, folks from certain demographic groups have been excluded from participation in certain spaces, right? And I think we could point to math and statistics, and we can see that historically there hasn't been the invitation to participate through the experiences that people receive in K-12 education. And then that might create what some people would consider to be pipeline challenges. But I think I would encourage us, first of all, to maybe let's get rid of the thought that people are unicorns, right? Just because the pool is not as large as what we would envision or what we're trying to achieve, there is still a lot of talent in these critical demographic groups within our discipline. And I think the way we get around this notion that is playing out is by being very intentional about having the talent sourcing and the talent recruitment of members from these critical demographic groups as part of our broader talent acquisition strategy. If your talent acquisition strategy is pretty much based on people finding you and applying for roles that you have at your company, you may not be as successful as you could be if you took the stance that I am going to actively and intentionally go out and find the talent that my organization needs to achieve the vision that we have for ourselves.
I agree 100%. Nothing more to add there. Give the time back to Paulette.
Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity to continue. Some internal challenges and considerations. Like I said before, we have many diverse backgrounds and ethnicities and perspectives within the organizations. And we need to provide resources to help employees to grapple with some of these problems. So for example, we can have employee resource groups for, let's say, for Black employees, Latinx, and for women groups, and other things like we had mentioned earlier. We have unconscious bias training, et cetera, in order to help employees. It is very important for us to foster an atmosphere where employees feel empowered. People aren't going to speak up and tell you that they have a problem if they think that they're going to have repercussions. 9 times out of 10, if that's the case, they won't say anything. They'll just go and leave and go to another company. And then we have a retention problem. It is important for us to develop respect for different perspectives, cultural practices, and worldviews. Some external challenges also is one that really is a big one. We have to dispel these negative views of the pharmaceutical industry. People think of us as just in terms of having high drug prices, and we have to let them know that there's a lot more to us than that, and the things that go into actually developing and bringing a drug to market. So we have to promote the pharmaceutical industry as a great place to work. We have to encourage interest in science, technology, engineering, and math among the students that are coming up, so that we have a pool of people that we can actually go to in order to fill our positions. Another challenge that we have is we have to compete with an explosion of technology, the new innovation research methodologies that continue to create new career paths. For example, Microsoft, Google, Wall Street, artificial intelligence, and Facebook. And 5 years from now, a lot of the careers that people may have won't even be possible, they'll be gone. In addition to competing with the explosion of technology, we have to compete with organizations from within our own industry for top talent. And of course, we have to compete with academia. We need to identify sponsorships to enhance our visibility so people know who we are and that we are really interested in being a diverse and inclusive profession. So as far as internal opportunities, there are ways that we can address these things. And Brian and Adria touched on these earlier. We can rewrite the job description to focus on skills rather than credentials. Another thing we could do is we can anonymize application materials like resumes and assessments. What we could do is we could blank out the names and the schools that people came from and just look at what's on the application in absence of that. And we will probably get different results. And in some cases, and I'm confident that we will get a more diverse workplace. We need to foster, of course, a diverse and inclusive environment. And it's very important for us to initiate sincere, honest, and continuous conversations pertaining to diversity and inclusion. We can do these things through unconscious bias training. A lot of times people may be biased against things and they don't even understand or know that what they're saying can be offensive to someone. And that's also helpful in that since we have so many diverse cultures and ethnicities, et cetera, we can understand the differences between us and respect them. We can do this through focus groups, surveys, workshops, and webinars. Focus groups and surveys, as was mentioned previously, can also help us to identify what's important to employees and how they see that the workplace is working for them and ways that we can improve it. We can also point employees to diversity and inclusion websites because there's a lot of good information out there outside of our particular organizations. We can encourage allyships. Allyships are good because you could take people from different backgrounds and they can help each other to understand. And especially if one may be more senior than the other, they can act as a sounding board for that individual, and they can intervene and be a spokesperson for that person. And that would be very helpful. Another thing that is important for organizations to do is to encourage their employees to engage in diversity and inclusion activities. But it's also very important for senior managers and managers on down to allocate time for the employees to do this. I mean, it sounds good, it sounds nice, but if employees don't have any time in their schedule to do it or to work on these activities, then it'll be for naught. Some other external opportunities are we can engage proactively with diversity chapters of statistical organizations and groups. We can increase our efforts to attract diverse candidates. And one way we could do this is by thinking outside the box and thinking of different places that we can recruit. Of course, we recruit at colleges and universities, but oftentimes the organization sends out a person to recruit for the whole organization. But I think it was Brian that said that we have to be more targeted than that. We need person to person. So we need statistician to statistician. We have to actually go out to these places and let them know that we are available and that we're serious about diversity. We can engage in career discussions at the pre-college and undergraduate levels. And once again, we want to encourage interest in data science, mathematics, and statistical careers. Another thing that's very helpful for this is mentoring of students and the organization providing summer internships. And of course, it's important to develop relationships with faculty and to take advantage of networking opportunities. So in summary, what we want to do, we want to attract top talent, but we also have to really put practices in place to make sure that we keep them once we get them. And we must make our employees feel included and empowered, not just to have a diverse workforce, but to have that workforce feel like they are included in the organization and that they belong there. It is also important for us as an industry to make sure that we increase the interest in the pharmaceutical industry. And it is important for us to emphasize and reiterate to our communities that we serve that the goal of the pharmaceutical industry is to develop drugs and therapies to save and improve the quality of life. I would like to acknowledge Ray Bain, Lisa Lupinacci, Amy Gillespie, Marcy Cavanaugh, Jeff Lavenberg, the board's diversity and inclusion ambassadors. And I would like to thank Adrian and Brian for all of their support now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. We are at kind of the end of our meeting time. I do see some of the comments and the interactions in our chatting kind of area, which is wonderful. So thank you very much again for the three wonderful presenters today. Adrian, Brian, and Pauline. Okay, that's end of today's event. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.